Welcome back, everybody, to Not Two Old Timers. I'm Brian,
And I'm Cory.
and we are two not too old timers sitting around telling stories and talking about things. So, Corey, what would you like to talk about today?
What are we talking about today? Let's talk about, let's start with something that's familiar with us, military stuff.
Sounds good. So, how about we talk about retiring overseas?
I am familiar with that subject.
As am I. Yeah. Well, you're more familiar with it as far as the actual retirement portion of
Oh,
it
yeah,
being,
there's two
being
ends of
active
that.
duty and retiring overseas, whereas I'm of the area of retiring stateside and then moving overseas and
Yeah,
having to deal with the retired life while being overseas.
right. So I'm still fairly newly retired, right? I'm within my first few years of retirement, but I've got the experience of retiring from overseas to overseas. I never went back CONUS to process through separations.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, CONUS is Continental United States. It's a military term often used by people overseas.
Yep. And I think the Air Force actually is unique with this perspective. I know the Marine Corps does not process separations from overseas. They actually send their individuals back to the states to process out. However, I think maybe that might only be. I think the Navy does it as well, actually, which would make sense. Uh, but in the event, that's my experience. I was able to process out of the military from overseas. I didn't have to go stateside to do it, and I didn't. I remained overseas uh, through
Okay, yeah.
immigrations. Yeah.
All right, well, I'll tell you what. How about you kick this off and tell us what it was like retiring?
Hmm.
Processing overseas, and then what you had to do for the VA and things like that.
Oh
And
my God, yeah, that's true. There's so much. So separating from the military, right? Regardless of whether it's a retirement or just a straight separation, is kind of a that's a big task. That is a monumental, life changing step to take, right? Is you're stepping, especially for someone who's been in the military for 20 plus years, you're stepping into a civilian world that you've not been a part of for all of that time. And for a lot of individuals that are in the military, uh, tend to come in when they're 18 years old, and then their entire adult life has been within the military structure. To separate that and go into civilian life, I remember thinking, I don't know how to be a civilian. I don't know what to do as a civilian, you know. But and a lot of it was just fear of the unknown, uncertainty as to what's going to happen, what's going to go right, what's going to go wrong, and just not uh, having an idea of the future, but not having a clear direction of the future, right?
yeah,
That
yeah.
was a scary part. But I had to, I separated while I was stationed in Japan, and I stayed in Japan once I separated, and I out processed to the Air Force base over here, and I had a couple of special circumstances because I was actually staying over here, and on the military side of the special circumstances, the process was actually really relatively easy because I reduced the burden on the military, right? And I reduced the things I needed to do. So I did not have to get, in the Air Force, we call it TMO, Traffic Management Office. That's what it stands for. We just call it TMO. But it's the household goods shipment, right? So I didn't have to process any of those, even though I had my orders and authorization to do so. I waived that because I was staying over here. I could have used it to move from one house over here to the other house over here, but it would have been a waste of that funding. It would have been a waste of it, and I kept that off to the side. I would have been able to use that authorization with my orders, with my separation orders, for an entire 12-month period. So anytime within my first year of retirement after my active separation date, I could have used a TMO service to process my household goods back to the States, wherever, right? And that was already approved and authorized. And the other second piece was I needed authorization to remain overseas from the military. And what that really meant was being stationed in Japan as active duty military, I was a status of forces agreement individual, right? I was in immigration status into Japan under SOFA status. And I was being removed from the SOFA status. So I needed the credibility to tell the military, hey, I'm going to remain over structure and I'm not going to violate the laws of immigration. In the meantime, I plan on submitting for immigrations. Uh, and I recognize I'm going to lose my SOFA status. And from the day I lose my SOFA status, I have the 90-day window that I would be on a tourist visa with passport, right? I would have a 90-day window to clear up my immigration status and get it where it needs to be. But the hard part was I couldn't do any of that immigration status with Japan's immigration office until I was fully separated. I couldn't do any and start the process even when I was on my terminal leave. So I separated from military, out processed. I was on my leave, right? I had a lot of leave saved up. And so I was just taking all these days of leave being overseas, and I hit my separation date. And then the day after separation date, I could then go to to Japan immigration office and file the paperwork for actual immigration into Japan.
And that's just the temporary, like not you're not giving you didn't apply to be a citizen of Japan. You're just like a green card, right?
Yeah, it's and that's what it is. It's a green card, right? I'm not yet a permanent resident of Japan. I'm a temporary resident of Japan.
Right.
And my first green card was only good for 1 year, and then when I resubmitted the documents for my next green card, it's not called a green card in Japan. However, everybody knows, and even the immigration, card in the U.S. is no longer a green card either. Yet everybody's stuck with that term green card. But I have my green card, and it's now good for a few more years on top of that first year, right? So, and I'll have to refile it. After so many, I can submit for a permanent resident, and just kind of have an indefinite green card. But
Okay.
I
All right.
have not relinquished. This is actually a really good point. Even though I live in Japan, right? I'm still an American citizen. I haven't relinquished citizenship of America, and I have not become a Japanese citizen. Japan immigration is a little different compared to like American immigration, right? Because in America, we have so much immigration that comes into America, and we have so many people from outside of America that become American citizens, right? It's one of the unique places in the whole world where you can travel, or anyone in the world can potentially can become an American citizen or can become American, right? Whereas in Japan, I will never be a Japanese member. I will never be Japanese. It's just,
Right.
even just saying that, it sounds silly. Like, I'll never be
Yeah.
Japanese. Of course you're not Japanese, right? It sounds silly, but it's how it works, right? Um, Okay, so that was like a little bit of the immigration fear, right? Is how do I effectively stay here? I'm married to a Japanese individual, so I didn't have to apply for work visa or for a student visa or any of the there's all kinds of different visas that you can apply for. And even yes, I said it, student visa for
Yeah.
schooling, right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was thinking about going that route and stuff like that, but just marriage immigration it worked perfectly well. Um, and that took care of a lot of stressors when I finally got the process submitted and approved and picked up my card and everything, because it was like, okay, cool. Now I know I don't have to leave, right? I can stay here. I don't have to go back into the military and ship all of my stuff back to North Carolina, right? Um, but even with that stressor, like that's one part. That was just a small picture of the window of separation out of the military. Is I'm overseas, I'm stationed overseas, I'm separating, and I plan to remain overseas, right? Another factor was the VA, you know, was filing for a VA. And I think a lot can be done on this in a future segment, is the VA process itself. I was I was dealt a really bad time to separate when I separated, because there was there were no VSOs on island at the time. I had gone to the
And for the audience, what's VSO?
VSO stands for, it's a VA service representative, something like that. Let's look it up real quick. I'm gonna Google it.
It's a Veterans Services Officer or something to that nature,
I
right?
think you're right. Yeah, VSO,
Yeah, and we'll bring up these acronyms every once in a
Veterans
while.
Service Organization.
Oh, okay.
Veteran
So
Service
it's
Organization.
so
So
it's
it's an individual to assist with filing your VA claim,
okay,
who knows the wickets, right? Someone
right,
who's actually working for VA to assist with the VA process,
right.
right? And I didn't
And
have
at the
any
time,
around me, and they're
okay,
all over
yeah,
the place. They're everywhere, and it just so happens that the one that was on island had something come up, had to go back stateside, and they were working on getting his replacement in, right?
okay,
But I had a deadline, and I think this is an incredibly important thing to mention. When an individual, if you're separating from the military, you're offered something called BDD, a BDD claim, right? Bravo Delta Delta, and it's benefits delivered on discharge is what it stands for. And there's a window to have your documents and your file completed, started and completed prior to separation. And if you don't meet that window, then basically the VA gets to take their time to meet your claim. But if you meet that window, if you're actually good about what you do and you actually hit the requirements, then the VA is obligated to get everything to you by the time you discharge. And so you're holding them accountable to doing their job, right? You just have to work a little bit extra hard.
right,
And off the top of my head, I want to say that window was, you can start your package no more than 180 days from your separation day, but you have to have it finalized and entered into the system no later than 90 days prior to your separation date. So it's 90 days prior to you actually separating, you have to hit the enter button to submit,
right.
which that's a lot of work, right? And
Yeah,
you have 3 months, you only have 90 days from start filing to finish filing. So I took all this extra time in preparation to get the documents, get all the claim information needed to file it and save it. The issue was the VSO on island from that 180-day mark to the 90-day mark was gone. And the new replacement was coming in the month of my 90-day mark. And I was like, I can't risk it. I don't have enough time to do it. So I'm going to have to learn this system on my own. And so thank God this sweet website called YouTube exists. So I had to reference a lot to Dr. YouTube. And it taught me a lot about the, I don't recall the book now off the top of my head. I'll have to look it up, but we can go into depth with it. But I really did have to study and learn the language that VA used in I think it was the CFR guide, CFR something something. There's some numbers in there, but I actually had to download it and read it. And if you go to the VA website, it has it in there. And look up, like, how do they specify uh, bad knees? How do they specify bad back? How do they specify sciatic nerve pain and damage, right? How do you specify shoulder injuries? Like, all these different things that I needed to look up and get into so that I could go to the doctor, and when I file my claim and have that VA visit, I could appropriately talk the VA language with the doctor, right? And
right,
have it documented as such. And so I
right.
was just informing myself on, how do I not go in there and act fucking stupid and say, yeah, doc, my knee hurts, I don't know why, right? And just leave it at that.
And it only hurts every other Friday.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so I had to learn that. And thankfully, there's good VA, how to file VA claims and how to speak the VA language and stuff like that on YouTube, and I got to learn a lot through that. And then get into that CFR file and learn it, because even after that, like I submitted my VA claim, and there's a block on there that says, um, enter the VSO that you used for this area, and I didn't have one. I had done all it on my own. And so I processed it, and the VA actually sent an email back and said, "Hey, we noticed that you did not process this through a VSO. Are you sure you want to continue with this process, or do you want to retract it and get a VSO?" But by that time, it was already past the 90-day mark, and I was
Right.
like, "No, I'm not retracting this.
Yeah.
Submit,
Yeah.
right?" But somewhere in the VA chain, they noticed this, and when my VA claim was being processed, I noticed that a few changes were being made to the claims itself, and they had adjusted the titles and stuff like that. Not major changes, right? But they had
Right.
adjusted the titles to accurately reflect the way that they talked that I didn't pick
Right.
up on.
Right.
Different ways of
The
referring to
the
things.
different lingo and whatnot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That was so interesting, and oh my god, dude, it was such a big stressor. I was losing hair, like losing hair from retirement and out processing should have been a VA claim itself.
Yeah. 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 You should be able to claim the VA claim on the claim.
Yeah, that was nuts, but
Yeah.
that was
Causes
the process I did.
PTSD.
It was a needed thing that I had to do, and I had to hold myself accountable to doing all of these things. Right, I had to hold myself responsible for these actions, uh, to just go forward with life in the future, and continue to be successful. If I decided I'll do it tomorrow, I'll do it the next day, then I just wouldn't do it. I would just keep pushing it off. So it was a matter
Right.
of, I need to do this. This is what I'm going to do today. You know.
Yeah. So one thing I think that you failed to mention, and I'll just bring it up in the question form. How'd you go about getting a driver's license?
Oh man, that's a good one. I think this might be a show of its own. Um, Goodness. Okay, so this was actually really fun because once I lost my SOFA status, right? That's the status of forces agreements. No, once I was no longer in the military, so my actual day of discharge, I was no longer immigration into Japan under the status of forces agreement, which means I no longer had a status of forces agreement driving privileges, right? And so
And
I
just to
needed,
clarify, yeah, let me clarify real quick. Sorry, Corey.
yeah,
Um, when you're stationed overseas, you get what, especially here in Japan, they give you what's called a professional driver's license, and it's called a SOFA license, and it's basically a license they give to military members, contractors, dependents, that are over here under the status of forces, and you basically get a driver's license that is not a Japanese government issued driver's license, but
hmm,
that license is only good while you're still covered under the SOFA status.
right, right,
So, as Corey mentioned, once you're released from SOFA status, whether that be retirement or you move or whatever, that SOFA license is no longer valid.
yeah,
Sorry, I just didn't
yeah.
clear
No,
that
no,
up.
that's good. That's a good clarity. So once I lost that license, I did not have a license, in Japan, and I had a decision to make. I don't get in accidents. I know how to drive over here. I still had my car. I could drive with no license and see about getting away with it, but I decided that I would just allow my wife to drive me around everywhere I needed, which I regretted a lot. However, it was the right decision to make. But I couldn't get my Japanese license until I had my immigration documents done and my green
Right.
card in hand, right? And
Yeah.
so I had everything ready. I went down to the office, the driving Japanese driver's license issuance office, and got all the information that I needed to process getting a driver's license, right? And there was a couple of documents that I needed to go to the legal office and get signed. I needed to get my stateside driving record from North Carolina, even though I hadn't been in North Carolina for fucking a decade and a half, right? I needed to submit for my actual driver's license to North Carolina. I needed to have an active stateside driver's license. I needed to be able to present my actual SOFA license that had just expired to prove that I was driving in
Yeah.
Japan.
That you had experience driving in Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I would think I needed to get my driving record from Japan as well, which was through the insurance company, you know. And
Yeah.
that was actually fairly simple. And then I went down to made an appointment with the driving license issuance, the DMV, we would call it in the States, right?
Yeah.
And brought all that paperwork down and filled out some more paperwork down there. They give me a vision test and a color test, and that I could tell left and right and stuff like that. Um, that was pretty much it. That was my adventure of getting a driver's license. However, I made that sound really easy because the actual like
I remember.
there was a lot of unknowns. It seemed like I was the first person doing this in history. And I went down and talked to them personally, and they give me really good guidance. But anytime I talked to any of the other individuals around here that had like retired and stayed here, it was absolute nightmare and hell for them. You know, I have a friend. He's much older than me. He's been here for quite a long time, who didn't process that way, and went down to the driver's license uh, testing area and tested for his driver's license, but he would be given the English version of the test to help out with foreigners. But the English version of the test was so badly translated that he could not pass the test. And so he went back. He had to wait a week every time took a test, and he would go back, no kidding, every week. And he said he did that for like a year until finally he just kind of broke down at the counter on his last fail. And the lady just saw it in his face, just the utter defeat, and just looked at him and said, maybe you want to rethink this answer. That might be A.
That's hilarious.
And that caused him to pass. And he was just like, thank God. But for him, getting a driver's license, he kept telling me this his experience of getting his Japanese driver's license was such a nightmare that I was like, oh my God, I hope I don't have to do that. I pray to God I don't have to do that, because I might just ask for the Japanese test and learn how to read kanji.
You might be able to
It
do
might
it
be the
quicker in a
easier,
year.
yeah, it might be the easier form of doing this. Oh
All
my
right.
goodness.
Yeah.
But yeah, those were important records to have. My stateside driving information, my actual driver's license in Japan, my records, current driver's license in the States, and then from there it was just a paperwork process. But
Right.
unfortunately, I couldn't do that right out the gate. I actually had to get my immigration status squared away to
Right.
show that I'm actually a resident of Japan. Because it would seem weird if you were on a tourist visa going to get your Japanese driver's license. Like, you're on a tourist visa, go get your AAA license. Oh, and that was another thing. That was very, very important. They had asked specifically if I had an active AAA
The
international
international
driver's
drive.
license,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And people were telling me, maybe you should go get this. It might help you. But the result was actually, it would have complicated the process far more. Something within the Japanese law, when somebody has an international license, complicates the system. So they wouldn't have been able to give me a driver's license right there. I might have actually had to take the test because of that.
Oh, yeah. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
And I know you can order it online, but when I found that out, like, we were talking to them on the phone, and they were like, if you don't have one right now, do not get one.
Yeah. Yeah, and there would have been no real reason other than that little bit of gap that you
Just
had.
that 2-3 months. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, other than the VA stuff and the driver's license, what else did you have to do to kind of, or not VA, but the immigration and driver's license? What else
Yeah,
did you
there's
have to do to kind
immigrations,
of
there's
integrate?
driver's license, there's the out processing itself, right? And,
Yeah.
and and so, like, I had to seek approval through the military to remain overseas, which meant I really just had to simply get a letter signed by the commander, by a commander, my commander, and I just basically whipped up a simple letter. And went and visited him in his office, had a quick discussion on him. Hey, these are what I'm doing. This is the plans that I have set forward. I have this understanding that I need to be out on my tourist visa, by a 90-day mark. And if that's the case, this is the plan. I'm just going to fly to Thailand and then fly back the next day, and then re-enter the thing or re-enter Japan, and I have up to 2 times of doing that. So I
Right.
have plenty of time to get it squared away. And it was all good. It was really easy, you know. But beyond
Yeah.
that, like I had to figure out, what do I want to do when I'm separated? What do I want to do for work, right? And I was really heavily weighing on jumping straight into education and using that GI Bill, right? And for me, I'm a little bit older. I have the post 9/11 GI Bill and the Montgomery GI Bill, and I basically just pick one and go from there. But
Right.
I've to this day, I've never tapped into them. I still can, and I probably will at some point, because the benefits are really good, and they pay for housing, and that was a huge advantage, is separating from the military and utilizing the GI benefits. Being overseas, the GI benefits pays for housing, you know, and
Right.
so that was a good piece. But I had already secured myself a house over here. I bought myself a house. Being a mass sergeant in the Air Force, I was working like 18 hours a day. I did not have time to go out and have fun and spend my money and enjoy life, you know.
W-
So I was
And
making good pay, and I wasn't enjoying any of it. So I saved up all this money and I ended up buying a house out here, fucking straight up. It was
and I'd
great.
like to really clarify something moving forward. When you say working 18 hours a day, you meant just being employed, because we both know you didn't really work.
Ha, yeah. Oh my god. Boy, oh boy. I,
We'll go
to give
into
you
this
to give you
the work
credit,
stories.
to give you
We'll
credit,
go in,
you work
yeah.
far more than I do now.
Oh, currently, yeah.
Yeah. Actual
Yeah,
W-2 employment.
yeah, I had a very cush job when I retired.
God dang. Yeah. No, I
But
was I
no,
was
but we can
very
go into
excited for
the work
retirement.
portion of it. Sorry, I spoke over you. What?
Nothing. Go ahead.
I was just saying we could on a different episode we'll go over what it's like to work in the military and things like that.
It's good. I like that.
So you got your house, you know, living life. What's your daily life now
Now, post
that you're retired
retirement,
overseas?
yeah, post retirement is when I set up for retirement was incredibly important when I was still actively in the military, right? The intention was I wanted to be retired. I did my service, and I wanted to be retired, and I wanted to be at a point to where I had the ability to do anything I wanted to do at that point, and not be a slave to the system and be working paycheck to paycheck, basically, you know.
Right.
And anybody that's been in the military for 20 years knows that that's rough. That's a hard thing to do, you know. Um, but yeah, now I just enjoy life. I just get to go through my day, and do the things that I want to do or just need to take care of for that day. I'm not obligated to go to the office for 8 hours or 9 hours a day and do anything at all. I wake up when I want to wake up. I water the plants. I feed the dogs.
Okay.
I get my morning meditation in and be calm. Maybe go to the hospital, take the wife there, go to the vet, take the dogs there, and really thoroughly enjoy things. But the life of being retired overseas and being financially stable, to do so was an important setup for me, and I get to take advantage of that now.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it sounds like you're really living life, man.
watering plants and going to the vet.
Yeah.
I say that
Yeah.
because my dog's been sick the last few days. He had a pancreatitis flare up again, and so we've been bringing him to the vet every day for fluids and shots. Tomorrow's the last day. His blood work came back. He's much better. He's eating
Good.
again, so it's good.
Good. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
glad to hear that, man.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and when I said that you're living life, I meant it wholeheartedly. No malice. It was,
I get
I
to
know that,
thoroughly enjoy stuff,
yeah, that you worked hard to get where you're at,
and that's the
and
point. Yeah,
you've kind of set yourself up to be successful in that. Whereas I, I came from the, let's say, the opposite side of that.
hmm. Well, shit. It's time
um,
for your story today.
Yeah. Well, and my story is going to be quite short because I retired. It's been about 11 years now. I retired in the States, though, and started working
You were
for an.
stationed in the States at the time, right?
Yeah, yeah, I was
Yeah.
stationed down in Florida, and I retired and started the same thing. Got all the benefits. Although for me, when I retired in the States, I retired at that point where the VA didn't have that benefits on discharge.
Right.
I had to actually just fill out all the paperwork, do all that, and then wait the year, almost year and a half before I got a decision. But we'll go into that in another time. But I ended up going to work right away for for an aerospace company, and then really, being married to a Japanese lady, and then always loving it here in Japan, and wanting to come back. I got the opportunity. I was offered a job over here, and I took it. I came over about 2 years after I'd retired. I've been here quite some time now. But and again, where you had mentioned it, I work hard. I enjoy my life. I'm just one of those guys that has to work for
You like
some reason right now.
you like
You
the
know,
abuse.
yeah, yeah, pretty much. I think I was just conditioned to it as a kid. But so living over here as a retiree is a little different for me because I'm a retiree, but I'm still covered under SOFA. So I still have a SOFA license. I still have,
And
I
that's
do all
because
my.
you're still actively working side by side with
Yeah,
military
exactly.
operations.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a military contractor over here, so I'm afforded SOFA status, which means that I get a driver's license, SOFA driver's license. I don't have to go through immigration. I have a SOFA. My visa is basically the SOFA status. So although I am a retiree, I'm still a working retiree over here. So a lot of the stuff that you had to go through, I won't have to go through until I retire.
Right.
Which, knowing the way I spend money and my wife spends money, it probably won't be till I'm 70.
Stay
But
broke.
yeah, and it's not that we're broke, we make decent money here. It's just that, you know, I'm kind of like you. I don't want to um I don't want to get too deep into my work and all that. I'll leave that private, but we don't want to do anything till we can buy a home with cash,
Mm-hmm.
and because we don't want a mortgage, we're debt free right now. We don't want to have to get into any more debt,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that's real important as military retirees tend to come out of the military with a ton of debt. Um,
Oh my God, yes, right?
so
That's
I've made sure, and I know you're the same way. I've made sure that was my goal was to come out debt free. You know, and with I was lucky enough to get most of my education while I was still in. So which was just brutal for me. Taking classes while you're still active duty just
right.
sucks.
Right.
Um, but it paid off in the end, and so the wanting to get more education's never really been a goal, even if they were to pay me extra money. Um, but
Well, it's a matter of a need. Is there a need for further education? Right. And I
yeah,
think
not
both of
not in
us
my
are like, no, I don't have a need for further education.
yeah,
I could, you
right.
know, it's not going to hurt anything.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there are some people that feel that getting a higher education is just kind of a life goal or whatever. That
Right.
wasn't the case for me. I was just afraid that I wouldn't be able to get a job with just work experience, so I jumped into getting an education with that.
Mm-hmm.
But being over here as a retiree, there are still some hiccups that I have. Whereas, like for you, you have the Japanese insurance, the government provided insurance that all Japanese
You're talking about
residents
health
have.
insurance.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
health
yeah.
insurance.
Yeah.
Whereas I have, and I know you have TRICARE, but you probably don't use it.
I opted out of
Um,
it completely. I don't
oh,
because
okay.
TRICARE, you're paying for TRICARE. And over
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
as you know, over here, TRICARE access for civilians is shit.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
I
and
had
that's
no need. I had no need personally, and I had to really weigh the options and talk a lot about it because really in a toss-up place when I was retiring. Um, but I had no need to pay into a system that I was potentially going to use on top of the system I was already going to use, but
Right.
that potential system be such shit that I would never want to use it. So I didn't have a
Yeah,
need for it.
and I'll be honest, when I got here in 16, it wasn't so bad.
It's never
You
been this
know,
bad.
yeah, and it wasn't until, post COVID that, I don't know if they made changes in military healthcare or whatever, but I used to be able to go on base and be seen by a doctor and get everything taken care of. Now it's just like, well, you can call in and go on a wait list or blah, 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 blah. And it's, and we can go over military healthcare later, but the big thing is that for me, I don't have the Japanese insurance because I am SOFA.
You're sofa, so yeah,
Yeah.
you're not gonna be able to access that,
So that's, I think, my biggest,
which sucks for
um,
you, by the way.
yeah, yeah, which is I think is my biggest downfall here is just the medical care. I am getting older. I'm not old, but I am getting older. And those little aches and pains where it used to be I could just go to the hospital and get seen. I can't really do that now. Now, with that being said, I can go to a Japanese hospital and pay out of pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and surprisingly, it's super super inexpensive. It's
Right.
it's not expensive at all. I don't want to say cheap because cheap has a connotation, but it's very inexpensive.
Without insurance,
Yeah,
visiting Japanese healthcare, the cost of that compared to American healthcare costs are radically different. And
yes,
there's a lot of toss up in the states, that whole insurance thing that happened with healthcare. Um, American healthcare is so insanely overpriced. I
yeah,
when I being in the military for so long, when I found out the cost that families are burdened with to have a child, oh my god, dude, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. I was like, no wonder why people opt to not have children.
yeah, yeah.
Just
Well,
that sheer factor alone, that's insane.
and a correlation to that, Japanese uh, Japanese couples under the Japanese insurance, they get paid when they have children. They get an actual cash. And I know it's
There's an
used to offset
incentive.
other
There's an
costs.
incentive to
Yeah,
have children. Yeah, it's an offset.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's used to offset other costs, but they don't pay anything to have
Well,
a
it's
baby.
not much different than a child tax credit. It's just upfront.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's one of those things where it's like, for me, that I think is the biggest detractor of being overseas as a SOFA member, SOFA contractor, not so much as active duty, but a retiree, that's covered under SOFA, is the medical. Everything else is okay. The I've got no complaints, and I'm like you. Once I do stop working, I will retire full time here.
Mm-hmm. That's the
And
plan as of now. Yeah.
yeah,
So
yeah.
far as China doesn't attack us and bomb us to shit,
Well, in that case, that retirement's going to be the furthest thing from my
then
mind.
land will be cheap and accessible.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, and again, you come to Japan, especially certain areas of Japan, you're going to see a lot of expats, a lot of Americans that are retired here, um,
Well,
because it
you see
is,
that around the world. You see that in the
yeah,
Philippines. You see that in Thailand. You see that in around Japan and even in Korea. Like, and I'm speaking solely because we're in the Asia realm, but it's
right,
everywhere over here.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's so prevalent. I know it's prevalent in Europe, but it's not as prevalent as it is here in Asia. In a lot of those other countries, the smaller third world countries, is it's because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
You could literally retire from the military and live off your military retirement, which is not a lot, um, and live like a king in some of these countries.
Mm-hmm.
Not so much here in Japan, but
Not no. It's
yeah,
enough. It's enough to get the basic bills paid.
yeah. Well, it depends on what rank you retire at as well.
True.
You know,
And
and if you took Redux and all that other bullshit.
how your household, yeah, and how household economics,
Yeah,
works out,
yeah,
pans out for you, how you get it all planned out. Yeah.
yeah,
I actually I thought about this when you were talking, because you were talking about buying a house out here and the banking system. Um, you know, as a foreigner in Japan, I had the ability to purchase land and a house out here. So, and there was a lot of stipulations to it, and I got them all worked out. But the biggest factor was uh, the banking system over here would not give me any loans for a house, right? Even with massive, substantial down payments, they wouldn't give me loans because I was a foreigner and I wasn't in the systems, right? There's a lot of different requirements in the Japanese system in order to get a bank loan. It's very different than the states. Whereas the states, you have a um, help me out here. What's that?
Credit
Credit
score.
score. Yeah, you have a credit score, and you have a housing loan or a car loan, and they base your interest rate off of that credit score, right? But in Japan, the credit score is universally very low, and the banks loan money out only to extremely credible individuals with like only well-off
Right.
jobs that they've held
Yeah.
for quite a long time, and only full working employees, full-time employees. And so like if you're a part-time employee in Japan, you're never going to get a bank loan for a home, you know.
Yeah.
It's really
Not as an
strict.
individual. Yeah.
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 And so my house purchase, even though I was able to get a purchase out here, it was not with a bank loan. It was all like I looked like a fucking drug dealer when I walked into the bank and purchased a house because it was all in cash. And I was sweating balls walking in with that much fucking money.
You shouldn't have been. Not here in Japan. What are you going to do? Get robbed? No.
No, no, this is a real legitimately, this is probably the safest place in the world that I could have actually done that and been okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember when you told me that story, you were just like, oh my God, man. Walking in there with so much money. I was so nervous. And I was like, yeah, but you're buying a house, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
And I was trying to conceal it like the best way I could. It was just like in a backpack, and the backpack was strapped to my chest, and I just tried to, and I wore a hoodie, and I just tried to look like some, fucking skater kid.
Yeah. Walking in with $250,000.
And then it came time for fucking transaction, and I'm just pulling these giant lumps of fucking,
The straps of
one
money.
of
Yeah.
them, yeah, one was still fully wrapped from the original wrapping, like it never had been unsealed, and so it was just this
Yeah.
fucking huge brick. I was just
That's
like, oh,
funny.
it's so scary. But now, economically, now I live overseas, fully retired, but the house that I live in is fully paid off, and so I
Yeah.
don't have overhead for a housing payment. So I don't have to worry about that. That's not an expense of mine. I don't have rent. I don't have mortgage, um, and with the house purchase, I also purchased alongside it a pretty nice solar farm. And so currently, after I got all the documents figured out, I make a couple $100 of income depending on winter months and summer months and sun exposure every month for that. So honestly, my house and my property make me money as if I were renting it out.
Yeah, they kind of pay for themselves.
Yeah, it's not a lot, but the money I make off of the solar panel pays for way more than the electricity that I use and the propane that I use, the kerosene that I use, and the water that I use. Like it's great income, and it's just all
Yeah.
off to the side. And I pay Japanese taxes on that.
Yeah.
I file my Japanese taxes because I'm a resident of Japan. I have to file Japanese taxes. I'm also a U.S. citizen, so I am obligated, a
To report
privilege of
that.
being a United States citizen. Even though I live overseas, I still pay American taxes.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I mean, ultimately, our retirements, our pensions, taxed and all
Hmm.
that stuff. So one way or the other, they're going to get their money.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
So, all right. Well, I think we covered everything as
That
far
was
as
a
what
hell of
it's
a
like to
subject.
live.
That was good. We're 50 minutes into this.
Yeah. Well,
That
I
was a
mean,
fantastic subject. I
first
think
15
I think
minutes.
all of that is one show, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us, everybody. This has been Not Two Old Timers.
Do us a favor, give us a like, follow, and leave us a comment. Let us know what you want to listen to, what you want to hear.
Yeah, we're taking requests. Talk to you again next week, everybody.
See you later. Bye bye.
Bye.